Hello everyone, this is Sean.
And Eric.
And we are the host of the Strange Matters podcast.
At Strange Matters, we discuss anything just outside the norm, ranging from the bizarre and unexplained to the supernatural and paranormal and everything in between.
At Strange Matters, we cover topics like true crime, unsolved mysteries, urban legends, conspiracy theories, and unexplained paranormal events.
If this sounds like your type of show, come check us out at our website, strangematterspodcast.com, or find us on iTunes or other podcast apps. We hope to have you join us in our discussions of anything and everything strange and bizarre.
In the meantime, enjoy listening to our fellow Darknets podcast. Take care, everybody.
Greetings, comrades! In this episode, we will continue on our Stalin series, discussing the period from his first arrest to the revolution of 1905. And we shall be using our vast supply of literature, mind you, as we have acquired tons since the last episode, thanks to everyone who recommended books, by the way. We have acquired a lot of new stuff, and we shall be dealing with a brand new segment at the end of the show. We have acquired so much of Stalin's own writings that you'll be plenty surprised and, I hope, impressed when we shall be starting to do our new Ask Uncle Joe segment. Because, by this point, I think that it makes sense not only to speak just about Stalin, but let Stalin speak for himself. At any rate, let's get on with the show, and I hope you'll enjoy this episode. So, last time we ended up with Stalin getting arrested in Batumi in April 1902, during the meeting of the local party leaders. Obviously, now we should look into his prison activities. Firstly, I do have to mention that prisons at the time actually seem, well, tame and peaceful and quite nice places to be in, well, at least by comparison to what we will see later during Stalin's own rule. You see, while arrested in prison in Batumi, for this next year, he will be sending letters to his comrades outside, he'll be getting replies, organizing strikes in the city, and basically running a by-mail revolutionary business. And, of course, he'll get also busy converting his prison mates to the communist ideology. All in a day's work. And this whole situation reached its peak in March of 1903. This is when the Caucasus meetings of the revolutionary groups happened, and Stalin, while still in the Batumi prison, managed to get elected to the Central Committee of the newly founded Caucasus Soviet Committee, which would then try to organize all the revolutionary activities in the region. The authorities were a bit stunned by all of this situation, but they responded, and in April 1903, they moved him far away to another prison in the Kutaysk region. But such tiny things can't stop the great leader. You see, already in the 27th of July of 1903, Koba organizes a riot of the prisoners of his new Kutaysk facility. He arrived there at late April, and on 27th of July, he's already running riots in his new prison facility. Amazing. He presented the following demands to the prison administration. Put wooden planks for sleeping in the prison, as before that the prisoners had to sleep on the concrete floor. Allow the prisoners to have access to sauna twice per month, because as per every Soviet person ever, saunas are extremely important to us. And punish the prison guards who were excessively harsh or rude towards the prisoners, and well, Stalin and his followers at this point demanded a bit more humane treatment in general, which I find ridiculously ironic later on. Now, after announcing their demands, they read them aloud in the prison yard, they beat up and tied the guards, and then the prisoners started kicking and punching and breaking down the prison's gates. These gates, however, were reinforced with metal bars, so although the Stalin-led riot didn't bring them down, they caused a huge ruckus, and people report trembling of the whole facility from all this situation. Now, this was something new for the Kutaysk region. this prison got surrounded by army units. The local governor arrived, the local attorney general arrived, and the local chief of police arrived as well, bringing with him even more police units. But this will now actually show kind of this attitude of the Tsarist era prison regime, because I suppose they really aren't competent enough of running a totalitarian dictatorship, obviously. You see, after a while, talks started going on. For some reason, after all the blood that I have seen in these series, that someone is actually talking with the inmates and giving them something seems kind of weird. But yeah, talks started going on, and in the end, surprisingly enough, most of these demands were granted. However, the leaders of these riots got punished, and most of them ended up incarcerated or given longer sentences. In case of Stalin, well, Koba was charismatic. Really charismatic. So his punishment was being sent right back to Batumi. Because obviously, sending the local revolutionary leader right back to where he can run things easily through mail is obviously the greatest and best idea ever. So already in autumn 1903, Stalin is back in Batumi. Guess what he does there? Why, he organizes another prison riot, of course. This goes down in quite similar vein as the one in Kutaysk. And guess what? The demands of humane treatment of prisoners and better sleeping conditions and everything like that were met once again. I mean, this guy by now has, from prison, organized, or managed to get himself into positions of power, runs an illegal web of underground printing presses. He has organized 2 riots and hasn't been executed for that. The demands of these riots were met, and this is just the beginning of Stalin's career. The balls on this guy, the bravado, it's insane. But any rate, even though they have to give in to the demands, they still don't do anything that terrible with Stalin for a while, but, you know, after a bit, the authorities finally decide that, you know, enough's enough. Just, you had your 2 tries, Comrade Stalin. They are going to exile him. So, in mid-November, straight from the mess hall, in summer clothing, with riding boots on his feet and wearing a shirt with short sleeves, Stalin is grabbed by the cops and taken away. And this time, to the eastern Siberia, where he would arrive in the 27th of November, to the Novaya Uda village of the Balagan district of the Irkutsk governorship. A little bit about these exiles. They aren't nowhere near gulags by this point. Usually, there is only just some very few bored policemen over there for the whole village, and the surrounding nature and the cold and the remoteness itself is basically serving as a prevention mechanism. See, prisoners were free to walk around, they managed to hang out with the local people, they managed to get into affairs with them, they basically debated their own Marxist philosophy among each other, and just hung around, and they did some jobs to survive, but that's about it. The only thing that the prisoners were required to do they were required to live in these designated areas, and they had to sign a paper that they haven't just gone away, and they just got to visit the local police station now and then. And that was about it, because it's Siberia, and it's Russia, and it's huge, and it's terrible. But, do you think Stalin cares about such issues, such as being in Siberia? You see, his father-in-law, Sergei Aluliyev, will write in his memoirs about the great leader that Stalin's first escape attempt happened just 2 days later, on the 29th of November. That was unsuccessful. His second attempt of escape happened on the 6th of December. That also was unsuccessful, but gave Stalin some slack, really. It's really, really hard to rile up supporters for a massive revolution in a small village in the middle of nowhere, literally in Siberia, and he didn't even have telnet connection. City just had more oomph at this time, and his Katorga mates just weren't as interested in the workers' revolution. They were just too busy actually working for survival and just hanging out in the middle of nowhere. Because obviously they had free zone access, if you think about it. What's more funny is that his third escape attempt, also done in December, succeeded. Yes, for the third time. In the span of single month, Stalin attempts escaping. It succeeded, but it succeeded sort of. You see, Stalin escapes successfully because by this point, it's not like anyone's actually watching him. Stalin just escapes, but he comes back after that one. Because he escapes in mid-December and comes back to Novaya Uda in late December. Because his equipment was poor. He hadn't stashed any materials with him. He was literally alone in the vast Siberian lands with hundreds of kilometers between him and the closest other civilized location. See, the weirdest part is because this is how escape attempts went back in the day. When you get tired of living in your, small vacation in the Siberian lands, you just decided, you know what? I'm just gonna go through Taiga to the nearest train station. The problem is nearest train station is a bit far away, and you need to have some preparation for that. So Stalin learned about this situation now. But as he returns back to Novaya Uda, not all was terrible. As he's returning, a certain letter is awaiting him at this point. An important letter. From no other than our good old friend from previous series, Vladimir Ilyich Lenin himself. In memory of this event, Stalin would later write in his own memoirs, quote, "First time I met Lenin in 1903. Of course, this meeting wasn't in person, but in written form, as he sent a letter to me. But it left a strong impression in me, which didn't leave me during my whole work time in the party. I was in Siberia back then, in exile. Lenin used to write comparatively short letters back then, but they gave me a strong impression. They provided a brave, fearless criticism of the practices of our party, and provided a brilliantly clear and compressed layout of the party's agenda for the next period." End quote. And when you think about it, Stalin's in exile, and instead of, getting help on how to escape from this place, or how to just get out and what to do there, instead, Lenin writes to him and says, "Well, comrade, your party work on our great revolution is quite okay, but you should do this and this in the future. Just, when you get back, you can do this. It's gonna be fine." And it just kind of struck me. I mean, later on, as we know, and we have spoken about the gulags at length. We had a series about them here on the show, and I simply cannot imagine that anyone sitting in Stalin's gulags would enjoy this situation. I mean, these benefits that Stalin is getting are crazy, and yeah, I'm pretty sure Stalin actually learned from all this situation, because he was personally involved in his own prison system later on. And he learned how to make his prisons inescapable and crazy. He used the Siberian steppes as well, but you can just feel where he gets his ideas. And that's kind of scary, if you think about it a bit. But yeah, after receiving this letter, one of many to come, Stalin got really inspired, because, by this point, all up to this point, Stalin had been just a huge communist fanboy who just got active on his own. But now Stalin has gotten his recognition. So in the 5th of January, Stalin escapes again from his exile. And this time, he is prepared and successful, because you just can't keep the man down, really. Of course, he will be in a non-legal status for the following years to come, but not that anyone here should really care by this point, as Koba himself has decided, well, not to. By the way, by the end of his life, Stalin will have been arrested 8 times in total, and he will be exiled 7 times from those, and he will escape easily in all but the very last case. So yeah, all these escapades of Stalin just leaving this Novaya Uda for like 4 times, that all counts as one very successful escape attempt, because it just happens in this short span of time. So that's 1, not 4, mind you. Now, and this is interesting because some historians attribute this to Stalin being ridiculously and really very badass, but there are researchers out there who, from this conduct, conclude that he must have had some contacts in the Tsarist police, called Okhranka. Even more, there are theories that he might be a paid secret agent of said police. Now, Alex de Jong, in my single Western book about Stalin and his life, called Stalin and the Shaping of the Soviet Union, written in 1986 in London, notes that this idea is quite plausible, but not likely, if you think about it really. You see, by this point, Ochranka was the most efficient organization of all the corrupt Imperial Russia. They were the guys who were really doing their job, and they had been infiltrating the leadership of like all the major revolutionary organizations and social democratic organizations and everyone who opposed the Tsarist government. One of these examples would be Azev, the leading terrorist of the Socialist Revolutionary Party, and a member of its innermost circle, and he was an Ochranka agent for like years. And the Jung notes that Lenin's party was easy to penetrate, and it was much easier to infiltrate it than the opposing Menshevik wing of the Social Democrats. And he attributes this to the fact that Lenin attracted really hard men, most of them with a criminal background, already serving in these katorgas and everywhere. And they were like closer to the criminal authorities, and, they were used to, being, as he calls them, stool pigeons. Rather than, respectable Menshevik intellectuals, because Mensheviks were going, like, for the bourgeoisie wing of this social democratic stuff. And, unlike the Mensheviks, these Bolsheviks, they really needed money. They were living in the underground, they had basically no way of earning any respectable living, they had to rely on party contributions, and so they were kind of susceptible to Ochranka's agents offering them, hey, have some cash and tell me about the hidden activities that you and your party members are doing. The best known, by the way, Bolshevik double agent was Roman Malinovsky. He actually managed to become a member of the party's Central Committee. He retained his position for many, many years, largely also because Lenin, at that time, refused to heed any warnings about him. Lenin, by the way, may have been well suited by an agent who served both masters effectively by ensuring that the Bolshevik and Menshevik factions remained divided, which shall become important in the 1905 revolution. On the point of being shot by revolutionaries in 1917, Malinovsky implored Lenin to kind of reveal that he had acted on Lenin's orders and stayed this double agent. But Lenin really didn't care at this point and just threw him out and just allowed the firing squad just to shoot Malinovsky. So this idea of infiltrating and Stalin being the secret agent is kind of interesting here. Because even the Bolshevik leadership in 1917, they will believe that one or more of their number, that, at least some of them, had compromising associations with the Ochranka. And interestingly enough, shortly before he himself died in a gulag, the last chief of Ochranka, General Junkovsky, kind of recalled the zeal with which Bolsheviks destroyed police records. And he noted that, this was far from disinterested. Now, obviously, there is nothing implausible about leading Bolsheviks working for the police, but was Stalin a double agent, really? And now I'm quoting directly from the Jung. A clumsily forged document appearing to confirm the charge led one author, Isaac Don Levine, to explain Stalin's purges as an attempt to cover his tracks. Nevertheless, no evidence has survived to suggest that Stalin was a long-term police informer. And here I have to comment, well, obviously, even if Stalin was a police informer, all that evidence would be lost, changed, destroyed, or, gotten rid of in very efficient and nice ways. By the way, we have surviving police records about Stalin's escape at this. When Stalin escapes from Novaya Uda, like we just mentioned, the police put out the local version of an all-points bulletin. And I quote it here. Quote, Circular of the Ministry of Interior, Department of Police, Special Section, May 1, 1904, number 5500. To all city and provincial governors, chiefs of police, chiefs of provincial gendarmes, railroad police, and all border posts. The Department of Police has the honor of communicating to you the following terms to be dealt with as appropriate. Number 1. A list of persons wanted by the police. List 1. Persons wanted in connection with political affairs. And there he skips some points. Page 20. Number 52. Djugashvili, Josif Vissarionovich, peasant from the village of Didi Lilo, Tiflis district, Tiflis province, born 1881. Orthodox. Educated Gori Church School, Tbilisi Theological Seminary, unmarried. Father Vissarion, whereabouts unknown. Mother Yekaterina, resident Gori, Tbilisi province. Banished for 3 years to eastern Siberia under open police surveillance for crimes against the state. Residence assigned in Galagan district, Irkutsk province, disappeared January 5th, 1904. Description. Height, 2 arshins, 4.5 vershki, which is 5 feet 4 inches. Average build, ordinary appearance, brown hair, reddish-brown mustache and beard, straight hair, no parting. Dark brown eyes of average size. Ordinary head shape. I wonder how ordinary appearance and ordinary head shape will actually look like, but that's a whole different question here. These documents are just simply great. Small flat forehead, long straight nose, long swarthy pockmarked face, missing front molar and right lower jaw, shortish height, which they just declared previously, but nobody cares about that. Sharp chin, soft voice, average size ears, ordinary gait, birthmark on left ear, second and third toes joint on left foot. Just amazing how these details just come out, and they come out in like May when he'll be just doing crazy things on May already. We'll get to that. Now, the craziest part is how the Jong notes is that, besides mistaking the date and place of Stalin's birth, this document gives, quote, a verbose, ill-organized, and unsatisfactory description. However, had Stalin been a police agent, it seems unlikely that a bulletin have been issued at all. Moreover, the document confirms that Stalin had effected a successful escape from Siberia. If he could manage it once, then why not 5 times more? Which is kind of interesting at this point to look at all these weird situations on Stalin maybe being a double agent. But this craziest idea, which I think validates some merit here, is that it's still plausible, and it wouldn't be below Stalin to just work with Okranka and shoot them all, as he will basically deal with his revolutionary comrades later on. He'll just shoot them too, and it will literally cause him no headaches or no problems of dealing with people here. But yeah, let us leave this one conspiracy theory away for now. This is just one of the more interesting details. Let's just talk about what he did after escaping. You see, first place where he went after escaping from Siberia was straight back to Batumi. He apparently liked that place very much, as he had all the contacts there and everything, but this thing didn't really go that smoothly for him. One Mr. Arsenidze, who was a party member at the time but later emigrated, wrote in an article, quote, Memories about Stalin, for the Russian language magazine published in New York, Novy Journal. And that, by the way, is the oldest Russian language literary periodical in print published outside of Russia. They have this cool title, and they've also been nominated for Nobel Prizes and everything. So he writes in this Novy Journal, or the New Magazine, in 1963, quote, I first met Stalin in Batumi in 1904. He had just returned from exile and had come straight to us. I saw a young man, dry, bony, with a pale brown pockmarked face and lively, crafty eyes. His opening words dealt with what he perceived as a certain shortcoming of our illegal publications. He disliked their lack of militancy. When their tone was justified as tactically appropriate, this silenced him, though a crafty smile continued to play across his lips. After this, he saw fit to ignore the committee altogether. He devoted all his efforts to restoring direct contact with the workers, among whom, thanks to his earlier activities, he had a number of acquaintances. He spent the better part of a fortnight with them, having secret talks and discussions. As far as I'm aware, the discussions did not reach a satisfactory conclusion, and soon after, Stalin left Batumi. I got the impression that Sosso used them to try to gain support for his ambitious plans and approval for his earlier behavior in Batumi, but he found neither. even though he had returned expecting them to welcome him with open arms. It is scarcely surprising that he was put out and disappointed by his reception." End quote. Now, there are other sources which basically add to this that Stalin apparently had tried to provoke the workers into direct action, as he was accusing the local committee of cowardice when, they obviously failed to support him. You see, in 1904, the Social Democrats at the Batumi had decided to celebrate the 1st of May somewhat discreetly. They had just planned to hold their annual demonstration or something as usual, but nothing as crazy as Stalin had done before. After causing 2 prison riots and, getting in a lot of trouble, the Social Democrats just wanted to do things a bit more kind of easier or something. Their demonstration this time would be they would demonstrate by going into sea in rowing boats and, just proceeding some way out. And I have to admit that it's a weird way of demonstrating. You take small fishing boats and then you row into the sea, and it's kind of weird. By the way, and en route to the meeting place, an occupant of Stalin's boat began to tease him. Stalin expressed his displeasure by tipping him into the sea and rowing on. Fortunately, another boat appeared to fish out the humorist, who was not a strong swimmer. But the incident took much of the fun out of May Day. And here we're gonna go back to some conflicting evidence, but this is one of the sources here which says that Stalin was in Batumi during May Day, but this is where reality shifts happen once again, because some sources of the Russian side will again mention completely different dates, but I want to just comment slightly on this Batumi incident, on the fact that Stalin is just, someone in Stalin's boat is, they're just rowing out in the sea, and I don't know how this is supposed to work, because I presume Stalin must have been, terribly pissed off about the idea that what is going on here. Why would Stalin be enjoying just rowing out in the sea in rowboats? And I'm starting to suspect that maybe there was some people from Haranka involved in the Social Democratic stuff, but at any rate, even if this happened, and I very much doubt it, I just had to mention this, because this comes from, again, very dubious sources, but imagine this. Stalin just randomly, you row out in the sea, and then Stalin just throws you out of the boat for just being funny. Stalin's sense of humor was a bit strange. But yeah, so apparently that happened, and I don't even know. The more I learn about this situation, Stalin just casually, nonchalantly decides to murder people and cause riots, and it's crazy. But yeah, like I said about this event and May Day, it's complicated because my Russian-speaking sources, again, talk about another weird time shift. Because, for now, we know for sure that sometime between January 15 and January 25th, instead of being in Batumi, he went to Batumi, he hung out there, he got thrown out, but then he arrived back in the capital of Georgia, Tbilisi. Or, Tiflis, as it was called back then, and in some documents. But for consistency's sake, how it was called throughout the Soviet era, I'll just keep calling it Tbilisi, and I'm sorry, my Georgian friends, but I have done so in the previous episodes, and just changing names would be extremely confusing. At any rate, in Tbilisi, he meets a certain Rosenfeld, who will later become much more famous with his pseudonym Kamenev, which by the way means the Stone One, or Man of Stone, or Stone-like, just like Stalin is Man of Steel. And Kamenev helps him find a place to live, in a strangely documented matter, in an apartment of a factory worker named Morochkov. And I'm still a bit confused about how and why these Bolsheviks documented everything, but later on, this proper documentation and accounts of everything are really important. And while Stalin is at this setting up a place to live phase of his life, in late January, in Tbilisi again, in a random meeting in his ex-schoolmate's Mikhi Bocharidze's house, Stalin will, for the first time, meet Sergei Aluliev, who will later become his father-in-law, and whose memoirs are also one of the main sources of these series, and from where I find this information, which kind of contradicts the fact that Stalin would really be in May Day in Batumi, which just confused me once again. But just putting it out here so that you know that Stalin probably could teleport, or time travel or something. If every account of Stalin is true, then yeah, he probably managed to be in multiple places at once. But yeah, this is all documented. In February 1904, however, we already have some more reliable documents from the party's conventions. See, at this point, Stalin takes on the position that where he was elected in personally, and he becomes the leader of the Caucasus Soviet Committee of the Russian Communistic Party. And, Stalin becomes busy writing the Communist Political Program document, codenamed Credo, which is dedicated to internal party arguments and the organizational tasks for various party members. But again, this is all we know, because time shifting and weird uncertainties just prevail throughout these series. See, in the prologue to the first volume of the collected works of Stalin, it is kind of noted that it's just straight up there, and these were made in Soviet era. Quote, "Up until this point, we haven't found two important Stalin's works. Number 1, Program of Work in the Marxist Working Men's Circles, written in 1889, and Credo, written in 1904, end quote." And it's kind of crazy again. Because I wanted to read this document, but it's just not there. Because Stalin, during his reign, was basically deified. Like I and Stalin himself had said in the previous episodes, he will basically become an idea. But these two writings of his are simply not there. And no, we in the Eastern Border have no idea how and why. But if you find them, you can probably become terribly rich. But this leaves something more to all the conspiracy theory fans out there now, doesn't it? I mean, conspiracy theories about Stalin are also so wide and widespread and numerous that I'll probably dedicate a whole episode to them at some point in the future, but firstly, we kind of have to get through much of this era. Anyhow, during March and April, Stalin gets a bit ill and decides to visit his mother in his birthplace of Gori. It's just what he does. He visits his mom, probably notices that his dad has gone missing, or dead or something. But yeah, this is what he does. And Russian sources don't mention anything about May, but I presume that he will also stay he stayed either in Gori in May with his mother, or went to Batumi and participated in this May social democrat organized protest with boats in Batumi and almost killed his fellow comrade for making silly jokes. What a nice, fun man to hang out with. Great revolutionary leader, comrades. Simply great. In June, Stalin will arrive in Baku, where, under this authority of the Caucasus Soviet Committee, he will fire the local Menshevik committee and create a new Bolshevik one. The weirdest part is that, again, we have sources which state that instead of arriving in Baku under the authority of this committee, he just had to leave Tbilisi because, quote, his squabbles and intrigues had made too many enemies. Once he even came to blows with Philip Makaradze, a Bolshevik moderate. There is hearsay evidence of a second party court that banished him from Tbilisi again. End quote. But yeah, you may never know, because, again, poor documentation and shabby sources. But yeah, he just, at any rate, he arrives in Baku and throws out old Menshevik committee, apparently from the new committee. And he will write some articles in the newspaper Battle of the Proletariat. And in these articles there, he criticizes the Menshevik leaders harshly and dedicates much of his writing to propaganda of the necessity of an armed and violent uprising. Stalin will dedicate a lot of time at this period to armed violent uprisings because that seemed to be a hobby of his. Once he'll be just done with that, he will move on once again. And at the end of July 1904, Stalin will arrive, hey, guess where, in Kutaisi, again as the representative of his committee, to again reorganize the local regional committee. And yeah, Kutaisi is the place where he was sent from Batumi to his prison. And that's just fun. He just arrives there and while being searched for, as we noticed that in May 1904, his warrant has been issued all around Russia. According to reports, as a result of this situation where he just goes and reorganizes the local regional committee of this district, Quote, revolutionary work in the local villages was severely improved, and all the governorship of Kutais was covered in illegal revolutionary organizations, end quote. And while he was there, he also opens another illegal typography, his other hobby, which at this point was located in the home of one Vaso Gogiladze, and apparently operated there until the February of 1906. Again, I sometimes have to wonder how pedantic were these guys about documenting all this stuff. But this will play in further on, like I said, in the KGB, because for some reason, Nazis just shot people. Nazis didn't care about the proper documentation, but for KGB, they had to beat out a confession from you. They really cared about this legalese. And this is kind of this, in the roots, this immense bureaucracy is just at the root of the Communist Party, because everything needs a huge paper trail with it, for some reason. It's kind of crazy, but everything needs to be accounted for, and you need to sign a paper that you're actually guilty, even though it comes after harsh beatings and torments and everything, but they just noted down stuff. And that's great for us historians, unless most of these documents wouldn't contradict each other. Like in this wonderful case. At any rate, with these travels and positions of power, this is where his self-adopted nickname of Koba gains some real traction, as others start calling him that by this point, not just himself, as we noted previously when he escaped from his prison and went back to Batumi. The eyewitness still calls him Soso, but from now on, he shall be called Koba by everyone. Also, during September, Stalin will ride around this province of Kutais and its various villages, and he will just spawn Bolshevik organizations everywhere. And of course, he'll be writing letters to his patriots back in Georgia, and in these letters, he still calls for armed violent uprisings. I don't know. Armed violent uprising seems to be, Uncle Koba's favorite term ever. He will return back to Tbilisi in late October, where he will once again take up his bureaucratic position as the leader of this General Committee of Caucasus. And that's kind of weird, because if Stalin was thrown out from Tbilisi, then why would he come back and be the leader once again? Everything is very, very strange. But still, Stalin's knowledge of bureaucracy shall play a humongous major role in this story later on in further episodes, so note it down. Stalin is massively adept at this bureaucratic regime and bureaucratic everything, really. So, in the 29th of November, 1904, another key event happens. In the carpentry shop of certain M. Chordishvili, a party conference of the Caucasus Soviet Committee of the Communist Party happens. With our pal Koba in charge of these poor souls, many of whom will not survive either revolution or the civil war or their own buddy Stalin right there, these guys decide that it's time to start preparing for the Third Congress of the Russian Communist Party in Moscow. Stalin is once again sent away to Baku. And yeah, it all is sort of weird, so maybe he was in trouble with them, maybe he wasn't. And I'm just trying to find explanations why Stalin would later just shoot or arrest or kill most of these fellows. So I have to assume that he probably did have some conflicts with them. But technically, the nominal term is that Baku is a bit safer location to prepare for this. And in the beginning of December it is. But obviously, this is Stalin we're talking about here. And he immediately starts causing trouble in Baku as well. After he had thrown out the Menshevik Committee of Baku and set up his own, he just goes to Baku and does terrible, crazy stuff, as usual. And by the way, as another lucky find on all this situation, here is a young party member from Baku, one F. Hunyans, recalling her meeting with Stalin there. Quote, I found Koba in a small room. He was short, thin, and somewhat dejected looking, reminding me of a petty thief awaiting sentencing. He wore a dark blue peasant blouse, tight-fitting jacket, and a black Turkish cap. He treated me suspiciously. After lengthy questioning, he handed me a stack of illegal literature. I had my own copies of some of them, so I only took some of the ones he offered. He saw me to the door with that same guarded, mistrustful expression. And then later on in the quote, she confesses to Stefan Shaumyan, a leading Bolshevik, that Stalin made a bad impression on her as an intimidating and depressing person. And she asks him, "Is he like that with everybody?" "What are you talking about? He's an old comrade, very committed, very experienced," Shaumyan assured me. And then she later goes on to describe Stalin's behavior at local committee meetings. "It would be time to start, and Kobov would not be there. He always arrived late. Not very, but it never failed. When he got there, the atmosphere would change. It was not so much that it became businesslike as strained. Kobov would arrive with a book under his shortened left arm and sit somewhere to the side or in a corner. He would listen in silence until everyone had spoken. He always spoke last. Taking his time, he could compare the different views, weigh all the arguments, and, basing himself upon the most practical and far-sighted position, make his quote-unquote own motion with great finality, as though concluding the discussion. Thus, there was a sense of special importance to everything he said." And it's kind of weird, because this again is an interesting view of Stalin in action, really. And this is where he kind of exploits the format of a meeting in order to basically dominate it. And he does it and ignores every other opinion in the room. Much like, Lenin was an orator. Lenin spoke loudly and spoke first, and he just hated anyone opposing him. Stalin got around this by just speaking last, being silent, and just, having this threatened atmosphere around him. Here Stalin kind of shows an ability that he can summarize things, that he's a cunning, sly man, but he's not particularly interested in many kind of long speeches. Then again, you can clearly see that these are the characteristics which would eventually turn him into the manager and committee chairman and this kind of leader of Soviet Union. This is where you can see the future Stalin here. And this is important because, like I said, he starts causing trouble in Baku. At any rate, on the 5th of December of 1904, some of the workers from just a few oil production companies in the region decided to go on a strike. On the 9th, the Communist Party, this committee, organizes an illegal protest where Stalin, by the way, is participating personally while risking being arrested, because he doesn't care about that by this point, I think. This protest is continued by another one, also organized by the Communist Committee on the 12th of December 1904, where a decision among workers is made and they have this public declaration, quote, "on the support of the existing strike and turning it into a general one." And Stalin seems to be happy with this idea. So, under his leadership, with the aid of the local party member Japaridze, again, probably going to be deceased in future episodes, I'm just making assumptions here, but they're 90% true, they really turned this into a general strike of every oil production worker of the region of Baku, and Baku, by this point, are the oil fields of Russia. So, this general strike will be settled in the 31st of December, with the very first in the history of the working peoples of Russia collective deal between the workers and the industrialists. This, by the way, shall be the prelude of what's to come in the next episode, the Revolution of 1905, that is. This time, from Stalin's point of view, and much uglier than last time when I mentioned this in the Lenin series. Because this successful general strike served as a massive inspiration of many similar strikes all around Russia in the next few months. But that's for the next episode, as, like I said, 1905 is way too important. Before we go, though, while this is happening, in the 20th of December, 1904, Lenin will write a letter to the Caucasus Soviet Committee. He will ask Stalin for a chance to participate in their newspaper, The Battle of the Proletariat. For which, mind you, Lenin gives a very high praise, noting its strict Marxism and literal qualities. And that's something new for our old pal Lenin here, knowing that he loved his own writings more than anything else. The newspaper shall play a huge role in the upcoming First Russian Revolution, but like I said, more about that next time. Here I would like to note that, Stalin is really successful at getting his demands met somehow. Like, he organizes these prison riots and this Baku and everything, and as weird as it may seem, Stalin is really great at being a professional revolutionary. But I do have to say that this is not all for this episode. No. You see, like I mentioned in the last episode, our anniversary one, I have acquired access to simply gargantuan amounts of various magazines, and I believe that it's time to use them. So this time, in our new ending of episode series, just short cultural stuff about Stalin, which I'll post at the end of our historical episodes, and I'll call them Ask Uncle Joe for more comedy. I will read you this time, I will read you Stalin's short speech of the 19th Congress of the Communist Party, as it was published in the newspaper Zvaigzne, or The Star, in 15th of October 1952. Because in some episodes, Uncle Joe and terrible journalism provide for much more fun and entertainment than any political jokes. They'll be in plenty of supply later on, but, you have to save up some fun, good stuff for these episodes too, as they will get progressively darker and darker. But this is for this time. Honestly, after digging through newspapers and collected works of Stalin, I have understood that if you literally send me your question about, well, anything, I'm pretty sure that I can find you an answer to it, with a very real Stalin quote. Or maybe Lenin's, or some of their contemporaries, but Stalin took over where Lenin started and really expanded with the idea of spamming useless articles and speeches about literally everything. I'm not even sure he wrote most of these, because he had a whole army of bureaucrats under him, but you can probably send your question into Ask Uncle Joe segment, and yeah, get an answer. So really, feel free to send in your questions, comrades, and Uncle Joe will answer them, and I'll read those together with the funniest answers that I can find in future episodes. But now, before I'll start, there's something that you should know, because this is going to be very important in the reading of this speech. Namely, at all the times when I interrupt the speech with, and everybody applauds, quote or something, that's literally printed in the newspaper that way, in bold, and very center, because at this point it was very common for all the printings of the speeches to just print out random yells from the audience and all the applause and everything. And that will quite probably provide most of the hilarious stuff in this speech, and I hope you really enjoy this. But that'll happen right after the break, because we need to have some Alice in as well.
Hi, this is Alice. We would like to say hello and welcome to our newest patrons, John, Kai, Leonard, Zendog, James, Yanis, and Gabriel. Thank you so much. This month's Dark Myths featured show is Strange Matters. We made our episode 11 with them about supernatural stuff in Chernobyl. Had their plug in the beginning, so go check them out. We're also planning on an episode about Baba Vanga, the Bulgarian prophetess that was left alone by KGB and sometimes even consulted. Also, there's another podcast that we found out about, and we just want to tell you all about it. It's called Ear Hustle, and it's a special show as it is run by inmates of St. Quentin Prison. They only have 2 episodes so far, and the first one was about what it's like to live in a cell, how a cellmate means a lot. But the second one took a darker twist and left an impact on Kristaps, as it was about how prison can change a person. It's not an easy listen, but it's certainly interesting. So give Ear Hustle a listen, even though it might not be for everyone. And lastly, thank you all for listening to us. If you ever have any questions, you can write us up on our social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter. You can write us to our email, theeasternborder@gmail.com. Also, send in your questions for Ask Uncle Joe. If you want to support us, you can become a patron or support us through PayPal. We also have mugs and t-shirts if you ever want to buy one of those. Thank you for listening. And now back to the show.
The speech of Comrade Joseph Vissarionovich Stalin in the Lenin-Stalin Party's 19th Congress. And here's the first thing. As Stalin appears to give a speech, the delegates just start standing up and giving long applause, which turn into ovations. There are yells in the room. Hooray for Comrade Stalin! Long live Comrade Stalin! Greatness and glory to the great Stalin! Yes, I know it makes no sense, but this is how it is. So he speaks. Comrades, allow me, in the name of our Congress, say thank you to all the brotherly parties and groups whose representatives have honored our Congress with them being there, or who have sent to Congress the greetings. We are for friendly greetings, for good wishes, and for loyalty. Then another one. Storm-like long applauses which turn into more ovations. For us, especially important is this loyalty, which means readiness to support our party in its battle for the bright future of all the nations. In her battles against war, in her battles for saving the peace. Storm-like long applause. It would be wrong to think that our party, which has become a mighty force, does not need support anymore. It is wrong. For our party and our country, it was always necessary and will be necessary the loyalty and trust of the brotherly foreign peoples, sympathies and support of those peoples. The peculiarities of this support is that any brotherly party's support for our party's peaceful attempts, with that basically means that they are supporting their own people and their struggles of keeping the peace. When British workers in the 1918 and 1919, in the time when English bourgeoisie created an armed attack on the Soviet Union, organized battle against war with with their motto, "Hands off of Russia," that was the support, first and foremost, the support for their own people for the struggle for peace, but after that also support for the Soviet Union. When Comrade Torres or Comrade Togliatti says that their nations will not fight against the Soviet nation unions, storm-like crazy applause, then this is the support, first and foremost, to the French and Italian workers and peasants who fight for peace, but after that, support for Soviet Union's peaceful attempts. Attempts of what is not explained. It doesn't matter, really. This support that we give each other is kind of, the peculiarities of this is being explained with the fact that the interests of our party are not contradicting theirs, but instead the interests of our party are the interests of all of those peoples. Storm-like applause. And what is special about the Soviet Union, that our interests, the interests of the Soviet Union, they cannot be separated from the interests of peace throughout the whole world. It is only normal and understandable that our party simply cannot stay indebted to our brotherly parties, and that it itself must in turn support them and their nations in the struggle for freedom, in the struggle for keeping the peace. And as it's known, our party does exactly that. Storm-like applause. And here's a comment from me. Yeah, this is how he supports all the nice invasions, everything. Carrying on. After that, when our party in the 1917 took over the power, and after that, when our party did real things to eliminate the yoke of capitalists and bourgeoisie, the representatives of the brotherly parties were just so jubilant about the bravery of our party and success, and named it the Stormtroopers of the World Revolutionary and Workers' Movement. With this, they stated their hopes that the Stormtrooper success will make the status of those nations easier, the status of those nations who are being choked under the yoke of the capitalism. I think that our party has justified these hopes, especially during the period of Second World War, where the Soviet Union, while destroying the German and Japanese fascistic tyrants, saved the peoples of Europe and Asia from the threats of the fascistic slavery. Storm-like applause once again. They're like in every paragraph. Don't get any mistakes here. Of course, it was very hard to fulfill this honorful role, while the Stormtroopers were just a single unit, a single party. And while we almost alone had to do this first row role. But this time has passed. Now there's a completely different situation. Now went from China and Korea up to Czechoslovakia and Hungary. New stormtrooper squads have been created in the period of the People's Democratic countries. Now our party has easier time to fight, and it's better time for work as well. Long storm-like applause. A special attention must be paid to the fact that these communistic, democratic, or workers and peasants parties who haven't yet acquired power and are still working under the heel of the draconic bourgeoisie laws, they are working harder, and it's hard for them. But it is not as difficult to work under this terrible evil heel as it was for us Russian communists during the time of Tsarism, when even the smallest movement forward was declared as the harshest crime. But Russian communists managed to pull through. They weren't afraid, and they conquered. They achieved victory. The same thing shall happen to these parties. Now, a question must be asked. Why do these parties have it easier, unlike us, during the time of Russian communism during Tsarism? First and foremost, because in front of their eyes they have such successes in fights and everything else, like we have in the Soviet Union and other nations of people's democracy. Thus, they can learn from the mistakes and successes of these people, making their work easier. Secondly, because the bourgeoisie itself, the main enemy of the liberation movement, it has become different. It has changed a lot. It has become more reactionary, lost its ties to the people, and thus has weakened itself. It can be understood that this situation really makes the job of creating revolutions abroad much, much easier. Another round of storm-like, crazy, insane applause. In earlier times, bourgeoisie was more liberal, defended the liberties of bourgeoisie democracy, and created thus a popularity in its peoples. Now there is no smell left of liberalism. There is no more so-called personal freedom. The person's freedoms are only for those who own some capital, but everyone else is considered basically human petrol, human fuel. Everyone else are meant just for exploitation only. And if you think about it, again, this speech gives you such a huge food for thought about today's political situations, but I'm just not gonna get into this. I'm just gonna continue on. The principle of human and nation equality has been stomped underfoot. It has been replaced with exploitationary rights of the minority and the ones who are being exploited. The majority of the people, they have been turned into people without any rights whatsoever. Do you understand me, guys, in the United States in the 50s? You had no rights, obviously. Great. The flag of the of the democratic values of the bourgeoisie has been thrown overboard. I think this flag deserves to be picked up, and it shall be done by you, communist and democratic parties, representatives of these parties, and you shall have to carry it forward if you want to gather the majority of the people around you. There is no one else who could raise this flag. Again, storm-like, crazy applause. Earlier, bourgeoisie was the head of the nation. It defended the nation's rights of independence. They were presenting them higher than anything else. Now there's nothing left from the national principle. Now the bourgeoisie of the nations sell out their rights for dollars. National independence and national sovereignty flag has been thrown overboard. Again, I have to remind you that this flag shall be taken up by you, communist parties and representatives of these parties, and you will have to carry on this flag forward if you want to become the main force of the majority of your peoples. Again, I have to say there is no one else who can pick this flag up. Storm-like applause. This is the situation now. It is understandable that, all of these conditions have to make the work easier for the communistic and democratic parties who haven't come yet to power. And we shall help them with everything that we can. Now there is complete and total basis on hoping that our brotherly parties shall succeed and overthrow their yoke, and they shall they shall achieve victory in the lands of the capitalist tyranny. Another round of storm-like applause. Long live to our brotherly parties! Long applause. Long health and good health and long life to the leaders of our brotherly parties. Another round of long applause. Long live peace among nations. Long applause. Death to those who praise war. And this is the end of the speech. Everyone stands up. Storm-like, long, unending applause, which turns into ovations. Yells, long live to Comrade Stalin. Hooray for Comrade Stalin. Long live to the great hero of all the working peoples of the world, Comrade Stalin. Again, Comrade Stalin, hooray. Long live to peace among nations and Comrade Stalin. Hooray, hooray! Glory to Stalin! Uncle Joe really knows how to raise a crowd, doesn't he? But yeah, think about it. By this point, if a country even Stalin thought at this point that if you start to lose the liberal values of the bourgeoisie, which basically keeps every democracy in check, then radical communism can appear. And I will afford myself some slight commentary about radicalism, both right-wing and left-wing, because neo-Nazis and these so-called Antifa are one and the same to me. If you lose liberal values and values of freedom of speech and everything, then you're bound to make job and life easier for radicalists. And hey, a lot of people these days are just yelling about the fact that, hey, this is totally not true, we need stricter things. But Comrade Joe, Uncle Joe knew what he was speaking about. The less liberal you become, the easier it is for communists or fascists to take power. Advice from Uncle Joe! At any rate, let's end on this very cheerful note, and see you next time. До свидания, товарищи.
Thank you for listening to The Eastern Border. If you have any comments or specific details you'd like to know, you're welcome to leave it in the comment section on our site, theeasternborder.lv, and we'll rummage even to the western border to find you an answer. Like this podcast, subscribe to us on iTunes, Stitcher, or on our RSS feed. Happiness is mandatory. Good reviews and donations feed the farmers of our kolkhozs in the great motherland. The Eastern Border salutes you. This podcast is part of the Dark Myths Collective. Visit darkmyths.org for more shows like this one. The darkness awaits.